Hello and welcome back to McClaren Performance. Yes, England are doing really well, but I want to take a look at a team that really underperformed. Belgium have been considered the golden generation for a number of years now, but why did they underperform massively in this World Cup? In FIFA's rankings of national teams, Belgium have been in the number one position between 2018 and 2022, and going into this World Cup as well, they were even still in second place, regardless of the fact that they hadn't won anything at all throughout that entire period. Having players like Lukaku, De Bruyne, Hazard, they've always been considered, like I said, that golden generation, and because of that, they've always been considered, especially by FIFA, as a top team, if not the top team out of all the countries. Despite all that, nobody really had any real confidence in Belgium going into this World Cup. They had a bad run going into it, and when it came to the group stages, they only won one of those games. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of tactical reasons as to why a team like that would underperform. A lot of physical reasons also. I think one of those is that maybe that golden generation has passed. A lot of those players are around the age of 30, if not older. And considering that, they're maybe not going to play the way that they did before. But I am a sports psychologist, and I think there's something really interesting to talk about within that team. To see a team with names like that, players like that, you'd expect more of a performance from them. And I think a lot of that has a lot to do with the psychological foundation of the team. Just reading about what's been going on, seeing the stories in the papers. Yeah, I don't believe a lot of things that are in the papers, but you can tell there are some problems behind the scenes. And it is fun to speculate on why a team like that would fail in the end, and to speculate really on the psychological reasons for it. If you were to read a lot of the papers, a lot of the headlines, what you get the idea of is a team that is in a lot of conflict. For example, players coming out saying some players are too old, and another player coming out and saying, well, maybe they're too old. Reports of a lot of tension in camp, reports of a lot of conflict with the manager, not agreeing what the manager wants to do, maybe thinking the manager's been there for too long. When we talk about teams, and when you look in newspapers, say in articles, headlines, they always talk about conflict being a really bad thing. Bust up in the changing room. A conflict after losing a game, things like that. It's always portrayed as something that's really bad, a negative sign of an environment. But I'm kind of the opposite opinion of that, in a way, because I believe conflict is sometimes a good thing. I call it task or social conflict, where social conflict isn't really a good thing, but task conflict is, where you have a task, you have a process, and people argue and question that process and try and get to the bottom of it and try and find solutions. Because you might look at Belgium, for example, and they talk about the conflict they have, and you may think that is the source of the problem, that conflict is leading to those bad performances, which is leading to those results. But I would argue that conflict is just a byproduct of the situation that's going on. The actual source of the problem isn't actually the conflict, rather it's communication, specifically a lack of communication. I read a really interesting article by The Athletic talking about the reasons as to why Belgium didn't do so well. And that article started off with something that was really interesting to me, which is actually a problem that Belgium have always had, that the football team have always had, is that there is a conflict between two different languages. That divide is that many speak French, but also a lot of players also speak Flemish as well. The solution to that, and when Roberto Martinez came in, is that all the players speak English, the manager speaks English, everyone speaks English. So that became the main language that the players use, and that's of course a good thing. That's a good thing that they brought in. Players having different languages, right? That's not the sole reason as to why a team performs badly, but I think it's quite indicative. It's quite a good example of how important communication is in a team, because as the standards dropped within that Belgium side, so did the standards of just speaking English. And what that brings is a lack of communication. That may have been a part of it, that may have been all of it. Again, this is just speculation, but evidently there is that lack of communication. Now, I always give the metaphor of what a sports psychologist does. I always say a part of it, it's kind of like being a plumber. If you imagine the team are like pipes and water flowing through those pipes, and water is like information. It's got to get everywhere. It's got to get to everyone. And it's important that happens. That is how a team functions and how it keeps going. They have to communicate. They have to give information to each other to work as a team. But you often find that those pipes, they get blocked. You get little cliques. You get little groups of people. People keep information. 3 or 4 players maybe go off and they have their own ideas and conflict with the manager, conflict with the teams. That comes from a withholding of information. So an equal distribution of information to everybody leads to no conflict. But if there's information that's withheld, people have different ideas, different philosophies, there's splits, there's the pipes being blocked, as I would say, that is where you have problems. With different languages, what do you have? Pipes that can very easily be blocked. And that's really what I'm seeing evidence of. Like I said, I don't believe any article really, if any, not a lot. They're rarely ever true. It's usually from one source or another talking about whatever. But what that is evidence of is that people are talking to other people and not the players. Talking to other people and not the manager. Some players are saying this in front of the cameras, to which another player is saying something else in front of the cameras. Like I said, that information gets clogged up. 3 or 4 people, 3 or 4 players may withhold that information, have their own ideas, have their own philosophy, and that causes conflict. That is where conflict comes from. It's not from good people and bad people, competent people and incompetent people. It's from a lack of communication to be able to identify problems, talk about them, find solutions, and move forward. So I would argue with that Belgium team, some of the reported bust-ups and arguments that they had, that's probably the best thing that ever happened to them. And that probably should have happened more often, I imagine, as I find with lots of teams. They're discussions that should be had a lot of the time. There's this idea of having a positive environment, as if a positive environment is a good thing. But I'd argue that's not the case, because a positive environment is one that doesn't actually deal with problems, doesn't address problems, doesn't get into them, doesn't talk about them. Go, no, we're a positive environment. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to address that. It's not about having a positive one. It's about having a realistic one, a grounded one, a process-driven environment, one that is communicating, that is psychologically safe, that there's a hierarchy of people. That's the most important thing. Not a positive one, but one that functions. Because yes, Belgium have an aging squad, but like a lot of people have argued, the expiry date of players is going on and on. 30, 31, 32. Players can often be in their prime almost at that age. But you can also work with those players also. And you could argue there's a way they could have found to play, to work things out, to make things happen, to certainly perform better than what they did in this World Cup. But there were problems there that were not solved, and that came from a lack of communication. Not the conflict, but the lack of communication. Of course, that is just speculation from what you see from the outside, but I think it's a fantastic example of where teams fall short, where they have good players, a golden generation, but they don't actually perform as a team. They're not cohesive, they don't communicate, they don't face a situation for 90 minutes and talk and communicate and figure out how to solve that problem. Rather, information gets clogged up, cliques start to form, and then conflict happens within the group instead of conflict happening towards the team that you're playing. It's very similar to an old England team. The contrast between what they were and what they are now. The difference is that foundation of environment, communication, having things, process-driven, problem solving, everybody on the same page. That's what makes a good environment. It's a team sport, and it doesn't work without regular, proper, honest communication. Thank you for watching and listening. As always, I'm going away for a week next week, so I won't be doing a video for a while. Dad's also busy with Manchester United, so I don't know when we'll be able to do a podcast together. Maybe, hopefully we will. Maybe towards Christmas or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but I will be back in, say, a week or two. Make sure you like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe. Give a review, everything like that. Let me know what you think. If you don't like it, let me know. It's not about honest communication. That's absolutely fine. If you like it, let me know as well. But as always, thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you again, not next week, but maybe the week after.